Good afternoon. My name is Ann Cavall, and on behalf of the Breast Cancer Education Association Board and volunteers, I welcome you to the BCEA Webinar Education Series. We encourage all attendees to fully participate in this program and submit questions throughout the program. We will be tracking and moderating questions throughout the session via the chat box, and we'll try to get to all questions as time allows. Please also feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question during the program. We want this to be as interactive as possible and invite you to participate with your camera on if you feel comfortable doing so. This year's educational programming promises to encourage, engage, and empower those affected by breast cancer in a number of ways, including webinars such as this one offered throughout the year, and participation in and support of culturally appropriate cancer screening, education, and outreach programs to reduce disparities in the burden of cancer. We also deliver critical breast health information through our signature education conference held each October. This conference delivers the most up-to-date information on breast cancer diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship. Please mark your calendar for our 22nd annual conference on Saturday, October 14th, 2023. Our annual conference features recognized experts with the latest information on breast cancer detection, diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship. Complete details and registration will be available soon on our website at breastcancereducation.org under the conference schedule tab. We hope you will join us next October. We also offer increased ongoing resources on our website and social media channels that are available 24/7. If you weren't able to attend any of our previous webinars, recordings of these sessions are available on the BCA website at breastcancer.org, breastcancereducation.org under the webinar tab. This is a great way to easily access valuable information on a wide variety of topics at your convenience. The BCEA also welcomes your involvement in our organization. We welcome participation on all levels and have many different types of volunteer opportunities, whether it's just for an hour a year or a couple hours a month. We have exciting plans this year and hope you can help us deliver education and empowerment to those fighting breast cancer. Another quick, easy way to support BCEA and honor a loved one at the same time is by participating in our BCEA Honor Wall. All honorees are featured on our website, at all events, like at the beginning of this webinar, at conference, and on social media. Please consider making a small donation to support the fighters, celebrate the survivors, and honor the taken, all while ensuring that BCEA is able to continue offering critical breast health education. If you have not done so already, please be sure to connect with us on social media. We regularly share and foster discussion on the latest news and resources in breast cancer detection, diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship. We also encourage you to share what you learned today using hashtag BCEA webinar. Please also be sure to keep an eye out for more information on other upcoming webinars. We will share specific information on all sessions as soon as details are available. We could not offer cutting-edge programming, ongoing information, and outreach events throughout the year without the support of our generous sponsors. These sponsors include North Star Resource Group and Scott Richards Charitable Foundation, Genentech, Birchwood Financial Partners, Health Partners, Shulak Breastfest Music Festival, Tradition Capital Bank, CRL Women's Imaging, Hennepin Healthcare, Kaja Salon, AstraZeneca, Blue Cross Blue Shield Minnesota, and the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota. And now I'd like to introduce our featured speaker for today's webinar. Allison Breininger has a Master of Arts degree in education and spent 20 years teaching, training, directing, coaching, and creating content in the realm of education. At 31, she became a caregiver for her husband, Sean, when he was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease. In the 11 years since, she has been by his side through a bone marrow transplant and cancer of the tongue, throat, gums, bladder, and skin. In those years, she experienced firsthand that caregivers are in the negative space, vital yet overlooked and unsupported. Fueled by what she has seen, Allison founded the nonprofit, The Negative Space, as a way to use her experience and skills to change the way caregivers are seen and supported. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for being here. I am so looking forward to this. Let me just pull up my screen quick. There we go. Thanks for taking time to be here. I am so grateful for this opportunity and just grateful for all of you that you took time today to be here for this really important topic that people don't talk about enough, but that most of us experience, but also that you're here to spend time, if you're a caregiver, on your caregiving life. Most of us caregivers spend time on everybody else, but not always ourselves. So 1,000 points for you for being here today. I'm really glad that you're here. I would love to know what it is that brought you here today. So in the chat, as Anne said, we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible as we can for the short amount of time that we have. So in the chat, I would love to see, you tell me, is this something that you think about a lot? Is it a new topic that you want to learn more about? Do you just like coming to sessions with other caregivers? I know that that's kind of rare. Or is there another reason that you're here today? So in the chat, if you could put A, B, C, or D, just so we can sort of see what brought you here today. Right. A lot of people thinking about this topic. And the thing about this topic, though, is that a lot of people think about it. Not many people talk about it. So I'm glad that we have this time here together today. In our time, we are going to sort of define what this is, because a lot of people aren't sure. They're new to this topic. And so we're going to define what it is. We're going to talk about what might cause it for all of us, describe what it might feel like in our bodies, and then have some resources. So I know that we're going to aim this content at caregivers, but if you're here today and you're not a caregiver, just know that this is something that's true for everybody. We've had a lot of patients who have come to sessions like this and have said they're already anticipating their own death. They're having anticipatory grief for themselves. So whether you're a caregiver or not, there will certainly be things here for you today. I want to say that this is a pretty intense topic. And so if your feelings become intense and you need to turn off your camera or leave the session, there will be a recording of it later. And we're also fine with people being here all in your feelings. All the feelings are welcome. So really glad you're here. So let's get into what is anticipatory grief. The part of the definition that people think of the most often is anticipating death. So anticipating it before it's happening, grieving it now. So this is when your loved one is ill or when you're ill and you're already aware of and you're thinking about and grieving their future death, even when they're here. So in my introduction, Anne mentioned that my husband has a rare genetic disease. It's called Fanconi anemia. And the average age of death is about 32. And he is now 44. So it's amazing that he has, outlived that. And knowing that number has meant that we at our young age have thought a lot more and anticipated his death more than we would have as a typical couple that didn't have this diagnosis. And so I do want to clarify that anticipatory grief does not replace the regular kind of grief. I was coaching a caregiver once who said she felt like when her husband eventually died, that she thought that people were going to think she was cold-hearted because she thought that she would not be grieving at the time of his death because she had grieved so much beforehand. And I had to break it to her that it's not one or the other, unfortunately. And so it's not like just because we might be grieving our person's death now, doesn't mean we won't grieve afterwards as well. It's sort of like looking forward to an event doesn't mean you're not going to have fun there. Both are true. So unfortunately, we end up having this sort of double grief, the grief beforehand that we're talking about today, and then the grief afterwards. The other part of anticipatory grief that people don't often think about is grieving these other kinds of losses. So we might grieve our relationships or our roles. There might be things, perhaps like in a situation like mine, where you're a spousal caregiver, the roles change. And there are days that I feel more like a nurse than a spouse. And I grieve that. You might be caring for a parent and grieving the fact that you're now more in the role of being a parent to them yourself than being the child. Or maybe you're caring for a child and you're grieving the independence that you thought that they might have that they maybe don't at this age. All of those, either whether we're grieving now or things that we're seeing in the future that we're anticipating, can really take a toll. We can also grieve the expectations and the dreams that we had and the financial security that maybe we thought we had that maybe we don't have now that we are caregivers. So for example, my husband and I were actually in the process. We have one daughter who's adopted from Haiti, and we were in the process of filling out the paperwork to adopt 2 more children when he got his diagnosis. And my first thought when he got his diagnosis was, there's no way they're going to let us go through with the process anymore now that we have this diagnosis. And that is something that we dreamed of, had expected, and that we grieve. And so we think about the future and the past and think about things that we thought were going to happen. And so that's a huge part of this anticipatory grief. As we go through today, I would love if you have paper or whatever works for you. Maybe it's on your phone, maybe you like to write. I would love for you to just take, because our time together is short. And so, and I would guess that many people are going to rush off to their next thing after this. And so I'd love for you to take some notes if that works for you. So I want you to take a minute to think about, after you just heard me talk, how would you define anticipatory grief? And what are the things in your life right now, whatever role you might be in, that you're grieving? So you might want to draw a piece of paper that looks like this. And at this point, just do the top 2 lines. We're going to fill in the last 3 later, or whatever kind of works for you. But take a minute to think, to define for yourself, what's anticipatory grief in your own words, and what are things that you are currently grieving? As you do that, is there anyone who in the chat is willing to share with us? And if you want to share with the whole group, you can have it set to everyone. If you're only comfortable sharing with me, you can choose my name from the dropdown. But anybody interested in their sharing in the chat, what are some things that you're currently grieving? Take a minute to read what your friends and colleagues are saying here. Yeah. A word that I see coming up a lot is the word loss. Loss and losing, right? We're already thinking about this loss that we're going to have. And even though we haven't had it yet, we're anticipating that and we're grieving it now. And that the loss can be of the person, but someone also shared function and choices, right? Yeah, the unknown. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Let's keep moving through, and there'll be lots of opportunities to share as we continue talking. So now that we kind of know what it is, it's good to think about what causes it or what triggers it. And that can be different for each of us and can be different based on what season we're in our lives. So because most of us don't walk around with this feeling all the time, but instead there might be things that sort of trigger it. So it can be helpful to know what those things are because they can help us understand why we might be feeling the way that we are. So for example, you might be excited to go to somebody's baby shower. And then once you get there, you're hit with these feelings of anticipatory grief, maybe because your dreams of having a baby are no longer a reality, or because you were going to be you were expecting to be a grandparent and maybe that's not going to happen. And so you go to this joyful event and then suddenly you're like, why am I feeling this way? And you realize it's because of this grief that you're having around this thing around that you thought you might have, or you think might be in the future, but that there's a possibility it might not be there. And that can bring that on. Travel is another one. If you're on social media, you are just sort of bombarded with photos and things of other people off traveling. And as a caregiver, maybe that might not be part of your reality. Maybe it's something that you thought you and your family were going to do a lot of, and that either because of unexpected financial changes because of caregiving, or because the person you wanted to travel with is no longer able to do that, or your life just doesn't look the way you thought it was going to. Maybe that's just not on the table for you. And so seeing a travel commercial or hearing friends plan a trip might trigger some of this for you. So if either of these things, like a baby shower kind of event or travel, has been a trigger for you, put yes in the chat. As you do, I'll tell you, I have a colleague who lives in England and once asked if I had ever been to Europe. And I said that no, I had not. And he said, well, you clearly, it's not important to you, because if it had been, you would have made it work by now. And I just thought, oh, friend, you don't know the life of a caregiver, right? It's not so much about what we want to have happen, but what the reality is allowing us to have happen at this time. Yeah. All right, let's see what are some other things that might trigger us in our anticipatory grief. Milestone events, like college graduations or weddings, they can make us feel that. I know we have a 16-year-old daughter, and I often think, will he be here? Will my husband be here at the time of her high school graduation, her college graduation, her wedding? And so, at this, I'm already grieving the fact that that might not happen, and he might be, right? But those are things that I grieve in advance. And so when we get things like an invitation to somebody's wedding or graduation, that might be a trigger for you, because these are sort of these milestone things that families assume they're going to have. And in families where we're, dealing with different types of diseases, that's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed for anyone really, but for us, it's more prevalent, that thought. It might also happen when you see something like this simple thing of seeing an older couple walking down the street hand in hand. And that might make you realize, I thought that would be us, and it's not. Or I thought that would be my parents, and it's not going to be. So someone just said not being part of a couple anymore and how that changes the dynamic. Yeah. So seeing other couples, right, can really bring that up. I had a spousal caregiver once who told me he was on a bike ride and saw something very similar to this, an elderly couple taking a walk hand in hand. And he said it just punched him in the gut, knowing that that likely will not be he and his wife, that's the reality he thought he would have in his later life, and that will likely not happen. And he said it took him a couple of days to kind of recover from just seeing that one glimpse on his bike ride. And so I say this because it's important for us to realize, like, he sort of eventually figured out that that's why he was feeling the way he was feeling. But for us to realize that there are things like that are out there that could trigger us, that could help us realize and start realizing that we're grieving. So if either of these kinds of things have been impacted too, put yes in the chat. Either things like events, invitations, or seeing pictures of things that you thought might be you. Yeah. Oh, somebody said holiday advertisements. Yeah, advertisements. Yeah. Yes, that's a really good one. Thinking about the holidays and about how that, there's all these pictures of this is what it should look like. And this is, some of those milestone days and times of the year can be really hard. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Let's keep going. Another one is when your loved one might get a new diagnosis or a new medical update that sort of starts to paint the picture a little bit more of what's to come. And so, we're sometimes always like making stories in our head about what might happen. But sometimes when we get information from our medical professionals, it gives us more information that makes that picture a little more clear. And that clear picture can make us grieve. We can anticipate the end. We can anticipate this hard thing happening, and that can feel really hard. Spaces can also be triggers for us. Perhaps there was a certain hospital room that your person was in when something hard happened, or the ER, or something like that, or the clinic. And maybe even driving past that building can bring up things for you. And so that can be really challenging. You can fear the next time you have to go to the ER, or fear the next time you have to be at the clinic because of the things that have happened in the past and because of the things you fear might happen in the future at those places. So if either of these things have been true for you in your situation, put yes in the chat. Either a new diagnosis or the spaces. The spaces have brought out feelings for you. Yeah. Oh, someone says even the smell of the hospital or the valet. Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah. Those memories are so powerful, aren't they? I mean, I remember the shoes I was wearing on a day that was a very traumatic hospital day, and I don't think I've worn those shoes since. So it's those things to pay attention to, right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Another thing might be if you're part of a support group or disease community. Like, so some of you here today might be here because you're in the breast cancer. Um, you're in the breast cancer community. And so sometimes that can be really helpful because these are your people, they're the people who get it. But when you're in a tight community like that, losses can feel really challenging. So even at the beginning of this webinar, they had in memory of. And so seeing those things, it's a beautiful memory. And for us as caregivers and as patients, it can feel triggering. We might picture our person's name on one of those slides, right? It's almost like it's this crystal ball of what's going to happen in the future. And so sometimes our disease community can be this great support because they're the ones who understand more than anybody else. And sometimes it can be a cause of pain. Maybe there's a meeting that you go to once a year. And when you get there, you realize the people who have lost their lives in the times since you've been there. Or maybe every time you get the newsletter and there's a list of names. And so it's important to pay attention to that there are times that these communities can be so helpful. And there are times that there are pieces, and maybe it's time like you just don't watch during that time, or you don't look at that page, or you just things to pay attention to figure out what's triggering for you and which parts are supportive. Has anybody found this to be true? If so, write yes. And if you'd like to write any more details about that, share with us in the chat about what has it been like if you're in a disease community and how has that maybe been triggering for you? And if there's anybody who wants to unmute and share their voice to answer this question, you're welcome to do that as well. All right. So I know that I just, in a short 20 minutes, laid a lot of heavy things. I opened a lot of buckets that you will likely typically keep sealed, right? You don't often usually probably open these little Tupperware containers that I just opened up, especially in the middle of your day. And so I want to take a quick second before we move on, just to sort of care for ourselves. If you're in a space where you can do this, I would ask that you put your hands around your rib cage. And I want you to take in the deepest breath you've taken all day through your inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Feeling your rib cage expand while you do that. Even in moments like this, it's important for us to see like what's kind of bubbling up in our bodies as we talk about these hard things and to remember to breathe while we're doing it. So Most of your cameras are off. If you want to just keep on doing that and breathing while we talk, please feel free. All right. So before we move on, take a minute on your paper and think about what are the triggers for you. Maybe there's some that I mentioned, maybe there's some that I haven't, and add to your list those because it's important for us to be able to name them. Some people like to say name it to tame it. If we know what they are, that can be helpful. So take a second on your paper to write down what are your triggers, what are the things that make you feel some of that grief. I'll give you a second to do that. Anyone willing to share in the chat, what are your triggers or what are the things that maybe I haven't mentioned that have been triggering for you? All right, let's dig into what anticipatory grief can feel like in our bodies and in our minds. So sometimes it can feel like this picture, like a game of tug of war, because there's this tension, right? There's this tension between hope. You want to hope. I want to hope that my husband will live to a ripe old age and that he will be there for all the things. And then there's this acceptance of that's not what the data tells us, right? And so we live in this, we don't want to be so hopeful that we're sort of only having rose-colored glasses, but we don't want to be so in the acceptance that we miss out, right? And so we can feel this pull between the hope and the acceptance. Or there's also the tension between enjoying the moment, like he's here now, right? I should just enjoy every moment that he's here. But also, I can't ignore the loss that's going to happen. And so I anticipate that. And I feel cold and I feel guilty. Big one for caregivers, feeling guilt. I feel guilty when I feel when I'm not enjoying the whole moment because someday he won't be here and then I'll wish that I had done more, right? And so all of this pull. And so I'm wondering, does that feel familiar to you? Anybody want to unmute and share or share in the chat about this, how this feels in you and if you ever feel this tension?
Feel free to unmute yourself whenever you'd like. You don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to either. So we would love to hear from you. That's the value of this session, is not only Allison's great knowledge, but also your participation.
And also no pressure, right? We know that this is being recorded. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Absolutely.
If that, and that this is a sensitive topic. And so no pressure at all.
Ms. Todd.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Hey there, this is Casey. I just wanted to follow up with you real quick, make sure you confirm with the Comfort House for tomorrow.
Oh, I think Stacy is talking on the phone. I'm gonna mute her. Okay. All right, so a couple people have said in the chat that this tug of war feels helpful and a good way to describe it. Yeah, good. The moment of the cancer diagnosis, someone said, yeah, in that moment, you can feel this. You want to feel hopeful and you're also taking in the information. Someone described it to me the other day. She said that it was her husband who was sick and that he was the one, he was very much sort of like, we have to try every trial, we have to try everything. And she was more of like, could see the light at the end of the writing on the wall, shall I say. And she said it felt like she was doing the splits and her legs were being pulled in either direction because she wanted to be hopeful and supportive of him as he was like, let's try another trial, let's try another trial. And also she could see that the trials were not helping and that they were sort of hindering his final moments. And she just felt pulled, like she said, her legs, she felt like she was doing the splits. And I thought that was a really powerful way to think about that. Somebody said the tug you feel in your throat, right? Yeah. I'm enjoying the moment. I feel, yeah. I feel when I'm enjoying the moment, suddenly I feel the dread of maybe this is the last moment. And then that makes it harder for me to enjoy the moment. And I want to scream. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because there's that moment I find every time I see my husband and my daughter together, I just want to like take a picture because I think, look how beautiful this is. They're together. This is so wonderful. And I'm glad that I am more appreciative of that than most people. And also, like this person said, I want to scream because I don't want to have to think like, oh, what a precious moment. I just want it to be a moment. Right. And so that dread of is this the last one? And it sometimes interferes with the enjoying of the moment. And then you just, want to scream. Or if someone said that tug in the throat of like, I want to cry, but I'm also happy, but I'm sad, but I'm just, yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So I want you to take a minute and think about what it feels like. Does it feel like something stuck in your throat? Does it feel like you want to scream? Does it feel like tug of war? Write down just for yourself what it feels like maybe. And maybe those are emotions like guilt. Maybe it's dread. Maybe it's worry. Or maybe it's physical things like choking, screaming, or crying, or short of breath, right? So whatever it is that it feels like, take a minute to just write that down for yourself. And if anybody's interested, you can also share in the chat. What does it feel like for you, either the emotions or the physical feeling when you're hit with anticipatory grief? Oh, someone's got their hand up. Yeah.
Hi, it's Carrie. I was with Gloucestershire Carers in the United Kingdom. We support carers that are sort of informal family members and friends that are supporting somebody. And it was once described to me, and it kind of repeated itself continuously when we talk to carers about feeling exhausted, about not being able to take things for granted, that having to make everything a precious moment and not being able to just fully relax and just having to feel compelled all the time to take every single thing in every single time, which becomes absolutely exhausting for that person. So
Carrie, thank you so much for sharing that. So true, right? We can't just like have a bad day, have a good day, every day. We have to be like, this is the day. This is the most precious day. What if we look back later and think, I didn't make enough of that Tuesday, right? Like that's a lot of pressure to put on ourselves. And so it's exhausting. So I appreciate it very much, Carrie, that you brought that up. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I've got some stuff in the chat. So check out what your peers are writing here. Big gust of wind comes that causes them to gasp and catch their breath. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. All these things are so true, my friends, and all of these things are normal. I wish that you weren't feeling these things. And I want to tell you that they're normal, that you're feeling these ways. Yeah. And I think someone said the exhaustion, and Carrie mentioned exhaustion, because if you think about us carrying all of this around all the time and thinking about the future and the past and the this and the true, and then feeling like this tug and like I'm not doing the right thing, that's exhausting. We're spending a lot of energy on that on top of all of what we do as a caregiver already. So it's no wonder that we're tired, right? Thank you so much for those of you who shared. I appreciate it. And so I just do want to say that all of these feelings are normal and expected, and you have permission to feel all the feelings because you're a human going through like something extraordinarily hard. Having to spend time imagining life without our person, regardless of who that person is terrible. And so it makes perfect sense that you are feeling any of these feelings. Perfect sense. And I think that I hope that it can feel helpful to know, like sometimes, like if you get that college graduation, invitation in the mail, that you can say, like, why am I so crabby today? And then it might be like, oh, because I got that thing, because that's triggering this because of that, right? But just know that these feelings all make perfect sense. So if you're walking around feeling like this, there's a reason. So let's think about what might help. Okay. One thing is, like we've been talking about, knowing those triggers. If you know that, let's say, continuing to see these, what is it called? The river cruise people, right? Those ads on your Facebook page is triggering for you because that was something that you and your partner were going to go do. And now you realize it's not in the cards. Turn off the ads, right? Say, click on the button that says stop seeing these ads. If you know that going to that baby shower is going to be really hard for you, think about, is it one you can skip? If it isn't, can you bring, a good friend with you? Can you have an exit strategy? Can you plan something for yourself for afterwards, right? Knowing what these triggers are. And sometimes we don't, like my friend on the bike ride who just saw the couple and was just like knocked out for 2 days because of it. Sometimes we can't do anything about it, but knowing them might be helpful. Preparing when possible, right? So like I said, if you're going to that event and you know that it's going to be hard, is there anything that you can do to prepare yourself a little bit? Can you be honest about it? Right? I think that our culture is terrible at talking about death. And I can imagine conversations where someone might say, I'm just already thinking about the death of my loved one. And I can imagine the bright siding that might happen, the toxic positivity that might happen back at you of a person saying, but they're here now and enjoy it now. And why are you even thinking about that? Don't think about that. Don't give up hope, right? And that's hard. And so can you find someone in your life that you can be honest about it with? And to say, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what makes it worse. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's what that feels like in my body. Or is it, even if you're going to that graduation party and you know that that's going to be hard, can you say to the friend who's hosting it, I'm going to come and this might feel a little bit hard for me. So if I leave early, that's why, right? Are there ways in your life that you can be honest about it? Somebody unmute, somebody want to say something? Okay. Flag me down if you do. I'd love to hear from you. So when we think about, you wrote down a little bit ago about like how you can, what this shows up like in your body, right? So let's think about, is there anything that you can do for that? So these are just some different buckets of things that you can do to think about, both preemptively, like if we know that this is always happening, and as Carrie mentioned, it's exhausting, right? How can we, what can we do to be filling up our buckets in these ways all the time? And then also reactively in the times that we know that sense that it's happening. So I want you to take a couple of minutes to just think about this piece of strategies, right? And I'll go back in a second so you can see that screen again. But what are the things that might be helpful? Is it just knowing that this thing exists? Is it knowing what your triggers are? Is it making a plan? Is it having someone to talk to? Is it some of these heart, mind, body, spirit things? What is it that might be helpful that you can do for yourself, knowing that this anticipatory grief, it's not going away, right? But is there something that might be helpful to you? So I want you to take a minute or two and think about that, and feel free to share it in the chat if you'd like, so that we can all learn, or you can put it on your paper, whatever feels most helpful. If anybody's interested in sharing a strategy with us, that would be awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Somebody wrote just to me about, and this phrase I think is so true. It's that often caregivers can feel like this isn't the plan. This was not part of the plan. So I think that as humans, we sort of walk through our lives of like, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. And there are these milestones that we think that everyone's going to get. And when when caregiving comes into our lives, and then we realize, oh, that was not what we thought was going to happen, that can feel really hard. And there can be a lot of guilt around, well, I'm not sick, so I'm not the sick one, so I shouldn't complain. And yet, my friends, you are part of the story, and this has impacted your life as well. And so it is absolutely makes perfect sense that it's impacting you. That even though you are healthy, you're not the one who's going through the treatment or whatever that is, that, you are not living the life that you thought you were going to. And it is absolutely makes sense to grieve that. Yeah. So let's think for just a second about your loved one. So, as I said before, sometimes people, I had a patient himself came one time to the session because he said he is already grieving his what will likely be an early death. And so is this something that you feel like you can talk about with your loved one? Talk about how you're both feeling about it, about the things about their eventual passing, but also about the things that you had hoped would happen in your life that aren't happening. Does that feel like something that could happen? I know that people say, oh, I don't want to make them feel bad, right? And if it's something that they are likely thinking about as well, and that you two maybe aren't talking about. Is anybody willing to share about that? Like, what would that feel like to talk to your person, either in the chat or you can unmute? Could you talk to them, or have you talked to them about this? So that's something, it's a pretty personal question to ask. And so it's just something for you to think about. That can you talk to them about it? Would there be a benefit of talking to them about, this is how I'm feeling about this, or how are you feeling about this? Or, just to think about that. Because I think a lot goes unspoken in these caregiving situations. Yeah. I want to go back for a second. Somebody in the chat said that they talk to themselves the way they would talk as if they were talking to their best friend. That's really beautiful. Somebody, a caregiver the other day said, I can't ask for help. Like I would never, like I should just be able to do all of this by myself. And I said, would you say that to me, your fellow caregiver? Would you say, well, Allison shouldn't ask for help with her groceries. She should be able to do this all by herself. And she said, no, absolutely not. Right. So that's beautiful that someone is talking to herself the way she would talk to her best friend, right? Give ourselves the same grace and love that we would give to our friends. Yeah. Before I do my takeaways and we get into some time for questions, I would love in the chat any takeaways that you have had from today. We could turn this into a full week seminar, and I wish that we could, because there's a lot here. But in our limited time today, tell me in the chat or unmute and tell me, what are some takeaways that you've had from our time together today about anticipatory grief? Somebody raise their hand. Yeah, go ahead, Benita.
So right now my husband is quite ill, and right now I'm grieving the things that we can't do together, like going to the movies, going out to dinner. I keep driving past this bridge that we used to walk over all the time. We've been married 40 years. And for 5 years, we were his mom's caregiver, and she passed away a few months ago. And now, and so we couldn't do a lot of things because we always had to be there for her.
Yeah.
Now we can't do some of the things that we want to do because he's ill. So I'm feeling like, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings right now, but I'm missing some of the things that we used to just hang out and do. We were best friends, so that's
Yeah.
how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. Benita, thanks so much for sharing that. I'm sorry for the loss of your mother-in-law, and that situation that you're in right now. And so you bring up such a good point that it's not always like these big moments that we're missing. It's just want to go out to a movie with my husband. I just want to walk on the bridge. I just want to go out for dinner. Right. And those are the things that we see other people doing, and they just don't even realize that it's a big deal. Right. They're just going for a walk. They're just going out for dinner, and they do not realize that it's a huge deal that some of us can't do. And that can feel unfair. That comparison can feel really hard. I have a good friend who is a caregiver for his spouse, and he just went to take a little solo trip for himself, and because his wife is not well enough to travel. And at the airport, he saw this, sat next to this couple, and then put up all this stuff for him about like, that was supposed to be us. We were supposed to be traveling together. Right. Go ahead, Benita. Want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's how I feel. And then the older couple, my aunt passed away. So it's a long story. I'm not gonna get into that. Just in the last month also. And her and my uncle had been married for 71 years. And so they were both in their 90s. And I thought, wow, that's a long time to be married. It's longer than I've been alive. But when I see an older couple too, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, because someone might say, well, Benita, you've had 40 years, right? And you're like, yeah, and I want 70. Right. And so
Right, absolutely.
Yep. Exactly. And so don't let anybody bright side you into that to say like, well, you've had this many years, because yeah, I do. And I want more. I want to be 92. Like,
right, absolutely.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Somebody said unfair is a good word. Yeah. It can feel really unfair, frustrating. Yeah. A couple people have brought up like blessings and gratitude, and yes. And that's the tug, right? We want to see, wow, Benita's had 40 years. That's amazing. Like, I would love it if my husband and I can have 40 years. And she wants 70, right? And then everybody wants 70. So I think that it's, yes, we want to balance the gratitude and the blessings and what are we grateful for? What are we seeing? And also let ourselves have moments of like, and this is unfair. I'm grateful for this, and also kind of mad because I wanted more, or I want something different, or this is not the plan, right? Yeah. Somebody said recognizing that it can occur at any time, right? So we've talked about some triggers, but also to know that like we don't know what commercial is going to come on today, or what it is that you might drive past that bridge or whatever, and that it can hit at any time. And so it's sort of good to be always kind of taking good care of ourselves, but also realizing like, why am I so mad today? Why did I just cry? Because I saw a bridge. Oh, that's why. Right. So sometimes understanding why can feel good. Yeah. All right. So as some takeaways, anticipatory grief, it's mourning the loss of a loved one before they pass, as well as the future you thought you were going to have that may no longer be available to you. It can be triggered by a variety of things. These feelings are totally normal, and it can be helpful to know what strategies you find supportive. So before we get into to open it up for other questions and comments, I just want to say again, we opened up a lot of buckets today, right? We opened up a lot in the middle of your day, and you might have to go back into work or this or caregiving or life. And so let's take a minute to kind of reset ourselves, to have compassion for ourselves for all that we are living through and living with, and to thank ourselves for like taking this hour today to be here. So if you're comfortable, I like to put my hand on my chest. You can close your eyes if you feel comfortable with that. Another deep breath in and out. And think or say to yourself, like, I'm proud of myself for taking time to be here today. I'm grateful to know that I'm not alone in these feelings. My story and my feelings matter. Another big deep breath in and out. Make sure that throughout the rest of the day that you kind of pay attention, because like I said, we opened up Pandora's box today. So I know it sounds cheesy, but like drink a lot of water, try to get outside, like just take good care of yourself, because we just kind of unearthed a lot of feelings in this short hour. Before we open it up, I just want to say that at my nonprofit, The Negative Space, I offer a lot of resources for caregivers. I offer one-on-one coaching, so we can hang out and so that you can have a person that you can say all these things to. We talked about talking about it, and you might not have that person in your life, but you can talk to me, and I get it, unfortunately, but fortunately for you. So I do one-on-one coaching sessions. I offer support groups that are virtual. I have a podcast with a fellow spousal caregiver, but it's open. It's really relates to all caregiving, called In Sickness. I'm on social media and try to do some education and things there. And then also have caregiver gift boxes. And so if someone says, what would you like for your birthday? You could say, I'd like a gift box. So my contact information is there on the bottom, and I would love to be able to support you beyond this. This is just a short hour to talk about a big topic, and so I'm happy to support you in other ways. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then we're going to open it up. We have a few minutes left. Any things that anybody wants to say, comment, question about this topic or any other caregiving things in our last few minutes remaining?
Yeah, feel free again to unmute yourself, or if you're more comfortable putting in the chat, that's great. We'd love your questions, comments. Allison, thank you so much for sharing your contact information and those resources. That was my first question. So thank you for anticipating that and sharing that. One of the questions that we did get while we wait for others maybe to come in through the chat is you covered a lot of strategies, and what strategies do you suggest or find useful to stay in the present or stay in the moment?
That's a really good point. Yeah. I think just the awareness, right? The awareness of that I know that I'm a person, I'm big into calendars. I'm always looking ahead. Right. And so I think that just the awareness of like that we want to be present. And sort of trying to say like, I'm here right now. And I even sometimes think like visualize like a shelf next to me and what can I put on the shelf? So for this hour, I'm just going to be with my husband and my daughter, and I'm going to put this work thing or this other thing or this Medicare thing on a actual shelf. And sometimes when it's really hard, I even like draw a picture of the shelf and put a little box on there and say like Medicare or paperwork, whatever it is, right? Just to say like, there is a time for that. And the time for right now, this is what I'm doing. I'm right here. And so just sort of like trying any of those tricks, or just telling yourself like, I'm here and right for this, and giving yourself even that time to say, this is where we are right now. The future is unknown, but in this moment, what I know is that I'm here with these people. Yeah. Great question.
Thank you. And we talked about, should you talk should you talk and plan together? But there was that question, I guess since you covered that, how do you know? I mean, how do you know whether it really is to talk and plan together with your loved one, or to maybe just take it day by day, or what might be a signal to make that switch? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, for sure. And actually the next episode of my podcast that's coming out, we just interviewed a death doula. And so we talked about some of these things, some of these conversations about and that's about the actual like final days and weeks. And so she brought up some really great questions that you can ask and have good conversations with. So that's really around more of the like actual end of life, right? And I think that those questions, I think we all need to be having way sooner than later and not waiting day to day. I think that this question that we talked about today is more about, do we share with our person that we're thinking about it, right? That not saying things like, should we go and pick out our plots, right? Like not that, but should we share with our person? Like, sometimes I get really sad because I think about the times that you're not going to be here. And I'm thinking about that now, right? So it's less logistical and more sort of like feelings based. And I think that that's going to be case by case. I know that caregivers are going to say, I'm worried that I'm going to make them feel guilty or worried about me. And it's not about me, it's about them. Right. And so maybe it's not sharing it with your person, but maybe it's sharing it with a person, but I do think that the benefit of sharing it with your person is they are likely also thinking about the end for themselves. And so thinking about, giving them that opportunity to maybe say, do you ever feel grief already about the fact that your life might not be as long as we thought it, as we wanted it to be? Or are there things that about our life that you wanted to have happen that haven't happened and that feels, hard for you? So opening up the box for them to be able to say that too, because even the patient themselves might be being bright-sided by others by like, well, at least you're here, right? So maybe starting that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on steps to maybe setting goals for you and your loved ones? So for example, it may be, you talked about the triggering moments, but maybe there are some goal moments like attending a family's member's wedding or graduation, or do you have any advice on that? And,
Yeah.
ups and downs of that?
Yeah. I think ups and downs is probably a good way to describe it, right? Because I think, we could say, like, I've had people who are like, I'm going to be here until that, for my daughter's wedding kind of thing, right? But I think we don't know. I mean, every time my family plans something, we just assume it will be canceled because we just have a lot of ups and downs. And so when it isn't canceled, we're just sort of excited that it happened. And so I think for some people that can be this really nice anchoring moment of like, I'm going to be here for that thing, or I'm going to go do that thing. But also that can cause a lot of pressure because when you're dealing with medical stuff, you just don't know what's going to happen. Right. So I would say to, your person and like what's going to be motivating to them. But I think it more like things like, what's it Benita saying? Maybe like her goal is something like, I hope that at some point we can, watch a movie together again. Right. So something that can happen on different days. And it doesn't have to be like, I hope that on May 15th, I'm well enough to go to its graduation, because that puts a lot of pressure on everybody. Right. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Again, feel free to unmute if you feel comfortable. We'll just give a few more seconds to enter any questions or comments into the chat. We're so glad that you did take the time to participate today. If you love the webinar, we are again recording this, so we will share it on the BCEA website. And so we'll distribute that to all registrants afterwards. It may take a day or two, but we'll get that out to you. Feel free to share that link with anyone that you might, or that you think might benefit from this. But since I'm not seeing any more comments or any hands raised, just gracious thanks to Allison for her generous donation of time, expertise, and just insight into this difficult subject. Allison, you really make a difference in many people's lives, and we hope you feel the appreciation from all of us. We hope to see everybody participating today on future learning sessions this year and the next. Please be sure to visit our website and mark a calendar for the 22nd annual conference on October 14th, 2023 in St. Paul. We'd love to see you there. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.